Okay, today, guys, we're going to talk about the Euthyphro, particularly the Euthyphro dilemma, but I'm going to try to give you some background on the Euthyphro as a text and what's going on in ancient Greece that will allow you to appreciate a little bit better the text. So why are we reading a Platonic dialogue? So Plato's the author, and the format of the piece is a dialogue. So why are we reading this? Because this is a Western intro to philosophy class, and I'd be remiss to not make you read something from Plato. Bertrand Russell, a very famous 20th century philosopher and mathematician and logician, says that all of Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato. And we'll see why. But Plato is very historically relevant. A lot of the way Western philosophy proceeds is because of what Plato was doing. So I would feel like I'm not doing you guys a good service if I didn't have you read some sort of Platonic dialogue. Why are we reading the Euthyphro? Well, because it's one of the earliest examples we have of this particular problem, the Euthyphro dilemma, and an objection to what some people would consider to be a very intuitive way to think about where our morals come from, where do ethical principles come from. So it's really approachable as a dialogue goes. It's one of the earliest examples of this particular phenomenon, and you're getting introduced to Plato. And because it's a dialogue, I really urge you to read it out loud, especially if you're having trouble following. It's translated from ancient Greece into, or ancient Greek into some sort of contemporary English. This translation is not a very well-known one. It's just a common use one. However, it's still pretty decent. So read it out loud. Use one of your read-throughs to really try to get the cadence down so that you can see that Socrates, the main figure of the dialogues, is not being very kind to Euthyphro. And you get a sense of what's going on. So let's start with Socrates. Socrates, 470 to 399 BCE. There are pre-Socratics, and in fact, if you go back through Shakira, the singer's Twitter history, or X history, I don't know how to refer to it now, you'll see that back in 2012, she tweeted out a certificate that she'd gotten from a Harvard mini course on the pre-Socratic philosophers. So congratulations, you have something in common with Shakira, which is the study of philosophy, and also maybe that your hips don't lie. I'm not quite sure. But what I really want you to pick up on is just how old, how distant in the past this is. This is ancient, 470 to 399 BCE. This is nearly 500 years before the birth of Christ and nearly 1100 years before the birth of Muhammad. It is several thousand years after the birth of Buddha and people like Confucius. And so we're talking about kind of like this weird middle ground between like the ancientness of Eastern and Indian traditions and how recent some of the things that are influencing your beliefs and the way you think about the world are now. This is in between. And so you'll see in monastic traditions, so both Islamic monastic traditions and Christian monastic traditions, a lot of attention being paid to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Point out too, also to put on a timeline, this is much newer. So Socrates, Plato, Aristotle is much younger than a lot of Judaic traditions as well. So there's probably some degree of cultural exchange, at least with the Levant and Egypt, North Africa during Socrates, at least Plato and Aristotle's lives. So just, pay attention to this cultural exchange, and you might see there's some similarities in ideas and cross-cultural influences. Though we have no reason to think that there was cross-cultural exchange with Buddhists, Hindus, Taoists, or anything like that. So we don't have reason to think that there is that level of cross-cultural exchange, but there may be some Middle Eastern, ancient Near East influence. So just to situate that in time and in place. So Socrates is just a guy. He's not trained. He doesn't write anything down. We don't even know if he could write. Maybe he could, who knows. He certainly didn't write anything down. What he would do is he would walk around the city of Athens and just pose questions to people. This is called the Socratic method. The Socratic method is just you ask a question When somebody answers it, you ask them another question. You say, isn't it true? And then you put something out there and it goes back and forth. So rather than this method that we saw with, for instance, Descartes or Locke, where they're like, hey, here's a view, isn't that stupid? It's interactive. You go to somebody, you say, what's going on? They give a response, and then you keep asking. And you keep asking until we end up in this place where we don't have an answer, and the person admits that. And there's two kind of views about what's going on here. One is that Socrates is kind of buttering them up. Like, let's get through, you get to the point where you don't know, and so now that we've admitted that we don't know, we can start to rebuild some sort of understanding or knowledge. That's one view. You might call this like a charitable view. The other view is that Socrates was just getting these people to admit they didn't know, and he didn't really care if they did anything after that. He just wanted them to admit they didn't know. This may be a less charitable view. I don't know, it just depends on your perspective. But there's two views out there about what's going on. But in all the Socratic dialogues, this is what's happening. Somebody will take a stance. Socrates, as we'll see, is Plato's mouthpiece. Socrates will ask a question in response, and then it'll just go from there. And so instead of saying, I object, Socrates just asks questions. And he's known for doing this very publicly and often, to the point where he becomes sort of like a figure in Athens, like, oh, if you go to the market, don't stop and talk to Socrates. He is a bricklayer by trade, some sort of mason. He doesn't work often. He and his wife, his kids, they live in poverty because of this. His friends take care of him. He's got a lot of really wealthy friends. Not that he really cares about the things he has. He just, obviously, because he just wandered around and asked questions all the time. He's also a decorated veteran. So he fought in some wars. There was a period of time in Athens. So Athens is notoriously a democracy. There's a period of time during Socrates' life called the Three Tyrants period, where three tyrants ruled Athens, and they ordered Socrates to do something, and Socrates is notorious for refusing to do it. And so he's known for refusing to follow things or orders that he thinks are unjust. He's a war veteran. This is a pretty big deal in Athens. Every Athenian citizen, they were all male. To be a citizen in Athens, you had to be male. Every Athenian citizen was required to serve in the military, should it be necessary. They serve in these things called as hoplites and phalanxes, and it's very brutal, like physical combat. And Socrates held his ground. He's known for this. So he's well known in Athens. And we know the exact date he died. It's actually February 15th, 399 BCE, because he was put to death. He was executed for creating he was accused of corrupting the youth and creating false gods, being impious, essentially, which during this time period is a great national security threat. Athens is named for Athena. Their patron goddess is Athena, particularly Athena Nike, i.e. victorious Athena. And if you look at pictures of the statues in the Parthenon, they're no longer there. They're in the British Museum, I believe. Athens, so Athena is the big statue, and then there's a little statue, and it's the Athena Parthenos. That's Nike. So if you actually look at the picture of Athena in the Parthenon, there's going to be a little Nike, a little goddess of victory there. So the accusation of creating false gods is a pretty serious one, because it's the equivalent, the modern day equivalent of like selling nuclear secrets to a foreign state that is antagonistic towards the United States, right? There's parallels to this. This is a national security threat. So it wasn't just like, man, we hate Socrates, although that might have been what was going on. But there's like serious impetus upon the citizens of Athens to treat such accusations seriously, because Athena could just decide to punish them. Think of the Odyssey, think of the Iliad. So they took that sort of stuff very seriously. But it's also important to note that Socrates is potentially, at least as presented by Plato, religious fundamentalist. We'll just put it that way. He references this. So in the Euthyphro says, are you talking about your sign, your divine sign, Socrates? This is sometimes translated as daemon. So this word, Daemon. Socrates believed that the god spoke to him via like some sort of signal in his brain. So he would hear like he would describe it as like a buzzing, and then he would be compelled to try to talk people out of positions that were invirtuous or something like that, non-virtuous. And he believed that like the way that he acted was driven by divine desire. So the gods were leading him in this way. And he talks about it regularly in the dialogues, in the Apology, which is Plato's defense of Socrates when he's on trial. He actually says that a friend of his went to the Oracle of Delphi, which is Apollo's oracle. He get one shot to talk to the oracle. His friend asked, tell me about this guy in Socrates, or in Athens named Socrates, and they said that Socrates was blessed, that he was pious, that he was virtuous. So Socrates believes that he is on a mission from the gods, and that he is doing what the gods want him to do. Let's talk about Plato. Again, Socrates, by the way, he's the character that talks to Euthyphro in the Euthyphro. Plato is the author of these dialogues, the Euthyphro. He's Socrates' friend, student. Again, Socrates was never formally instructing anybody. He never wrote anything down. But Plato, he had a lot of followers, and Plato was one of them. Plato starts the academy in Athens. So he is a professional philosopher. He is an instructor. And he writes these dialogues after Socrates' death. Some of these, they're very quick reads. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, you can read the Apology, the Credo, this text, and really get a sense of what was going on at the time that Socrates was actually executed. And the way that he was executed, he was forced to drink hemlock. But if you read the Credo, he chooses to drink it, much to the misfortune of his friends. They were very saddened by this. So Plato writes all these dialogues. And if you look at a collected works of Plato, what you can find in the philosophy department in Dale Hall Tower, floor 600, in the lounge, you'll see that text is thicker than the Bible. The complete works of Shakespeare and the complete works of Aristotle, or the selected works of Aristotle, much thicker, but the complete works of Plato, substantial text. It's a large corpus, and lots of people read all of them. Other famous texts by Plato, it's the Republic, for instance, well-known text. All of the dialogues, like the Euthyphro. Now, the Republic is a dialogue, but it's a later text. They're named after the interlocutor. So who is Socrates talking to? It's going to be the main antagonist of these dialogues. It's going to be the title of the dialogue. So the Euthyphro, the Meno, the Credo. The Apology is another outlier, but most of them are named after the actual interlocutor. I'll give you some context there. So Plato is the actual author of this. He teaches a guy named Aristotle. A lot of us are very familiar with Aristotle. He taught a very famous Macedonian named Alexander the Great. He splits from Plato, forms his own school, and rejects a lot of Platonic teaching. So there's a lot going on here. Other philosophies that exist at this time is Epicureanism, Stoicism. These might be familiar terms to you. This was a hotbed of intellectual exchange and debate. And so we get a lot of philosophies that continue through the early church fathers, through the Roman Empire, through the monastic traditions, particularly in North Africa in the Near East, and come to us in nearly exact form, especially in terms of Plato. We have the ancient Greek, and now we just translate it into modern English. So it's phenomenal that we have these texts, just like it's phenomenal that we have the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and the Torah. Like, it's phenomenal that we have such ancient texts that we can study and go back to and see that people in the past were concerned about the same things we're concerned by. In the next lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this dialogic format and what exactly is going on in the dilemma.